Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me again. In the last video we looked at how to get a simple JavaScript app up and running using Webpack dev server. This time around we're going to try to move from just a simple JavaScript app or basic JavaScript app to a React app, so that we'll have just a very basic React app to start building. So first what I'd like to do is start a new project, and this will be a Node project. Alright, so you can call it whatever you like. I'm just going to call it React App, not Create React App, of course. Alright, bring that in. Okay, and we'll initialize it as a Node project. Okay, now we're not going to add any dependencies yet, but maybe we'll just go ahead and add a simple start script. Now what we're saying is that we're going to create a source folder and we're going to add to it an index.js file. So let's do that now. Okay, and into that index.js file, let's go ahead and add a message that we can print to the console. Okay, and if we go ahead and try to run our project now, we should be able to see that message in the console. And we do. So we've got our little simple Node project up and running. Okay, let's start adding things to it. Let's add another file, and we'll call this home.js. And here what we'd like to do is create a function that prints out a statement to the console and export that to the index.js file. So for now, create a function, and we'll just call it message. And that function will print that statement to the console. Okay, and to export it, we're going to use module.exports. We'll just call the function message, and we'll reference our message function. Excuse me. So in our index.js file, we'll need to bring that in. And you can bring it in this way. You can just say constant. And let's just call it message. We're going to require that file, which is home.js. Right now, we're not going to see that message yet because we haven't invoked the function that contains it, right? We have here the function message, but we haven't invoked it anywhere, so we shouldn't see it. So if we run our app, npm run start, we only see the original message that we had. We don't see the one from the home.js file. All right, so let's now invoke it. Remember, the function we call just MSG, right, and we invoke that. Okay, now we see both messages. That means we are successfully importing the function from the home.js file into index.js, right, and we see that message here. And of course, if we comment this out, then we won't see the message when we run it again. Okay, so we know that we are successfully importing it. And that's good. Excuse me. So now, how about using more modern JavaScript? Like instead of using this way of bringing in our home.js file, let's do this. Let's say import and excuse me, we'll just call it message from home.js. Right, that means over here in our home file, we're going to change this up a little bit. All right. All right, so that's our message now. And we don't use module.exports here. Actually, let's just call this a named export. Or let's make it a named export. And if it is a named export, then when we import it here, we need to include it in these curly braces. All right, and then if we want to invoke it, we don't do this. We just invoke what we brought in. Okay, but in some cases, you are not going to be able to transpile down from modern JavaScript to the JavaScript that's recognized by many browsers. So we'll need to add Babel to our package, right? But before we do that, we need to add Webpack. We don't even have Webpack in our project yet. But let's just try to run the start script to see what happens. Okay, we get an error. All right, and that's because we haven't installed any dependencies yet. All right, so let's first start by installing Webpack. And that'll be as deb dependencies. All right, so we have our Webpack here. And let's go ahead and set up a Webpack configuration file. And remember, by default, or the default name for a Webpack configuration file is webpack.config.js. All right, so that's what we'll use here. We'll bring in path. Remember, that's already included in Node. Module.exports. And we want to output this to a dist folder, if you remember. So the path was, we use path.resolve, _dir name, and the folder that we want to use, dist. Remember, we did this in the last video, so if this looks unfamiliar to you, please go back and check that out. Public path as the root. And the file name of the file we're going to create we'll call bundle.js. Okay. So we've got that. And now what you can do is you can just go into your root folder and you can create a file called dist, and not a file, excuse me, a folder. And in that folder you can add an index.html file. And we'll say the name of this file is React app not yet. We're not using React yet. We haven't even installed it as a dependency. All right. All right, and then we'll go ahead and add a script tag so we can install or we can inject our JavaScript. And remember, the source of this is going to be bundle.js. All right, we've set it up that way. Okay, so if we want to run our dev server, our Webpack dev server, we need to tell it what the content base is. Sorry, it's not content base here, it's dev server here. And then we use the property of content base. And then we're going to use the dist folder, but actually for now, why don't we just use the the index.js folder. Okay, and what happens if we try to run our dev server now? Actually, we need to set up a script to do that. So rather than using this script that we had before, we'll use Webpack dev server. We'll make sure that it knows we're in development mode. We'll make sure that it knows which configuration file to use, and we've only got one, and it's the default one, or the one with the default name. Excuse me. Webpack.config.js. And we also want it to open the page in our browser for us. Okay, so that looks good. And if we do npm run start, see what happens. Okay, so we're not getting anything here. All right, so what's happening is we're not bringing this index file. Well, actually, no, it shouldn't be looking up here in dist anyway. It should be looking down here in the src folder. And the reason being is we don't have an index file there. So I can just copy this and add it to our source folder. What are you doing? Paste it in. All right, good. There we go. All right, let's go ahead and stop our server and start it again. All right, and remember, this file needs to have the right JavaScript injected. So in this case, it's going to be index.js. All right, remember, this is the index.html file that's in our source folder, not in our dist folder. We want to keep the source for the dist folder index.html file as bundle.js. Right now, I just want to get the dev server up and running, so I'm going to use the index.js file in our source folder. Okay, so let's try this one more time. Okay, and that's still not working. All right, let's go ahead and check the console, see if we're not getting any errors here. Okay, so this is fail to load resource. Let's go ahead and change this to our dist folder. And first we'll actually have to build our Webpack bundle. All right, so then we'll add a build script here. And we'll use Webpack. All right, now if we do npm run build, good, we see that Webpack has added that bundle.js file to our dist folder. All right, and since now we're looking at the content base as dist, and if we run npm start, all right, good. So we actually do see our application is working. All right. Just somehow we weren't setting it up right to run it from the using the source folder as a content base. And for now, let's not worry too much about that, because ultimately we want to make sure that our files are getting served from this, or our content for our dev server is coming from this dist folder. That lets us know that we got everything we need, so that when we deploy our app, it's all the files that we'll need are in our dist folder. All right, so let's leave it that way. And things are running just fine here. We're not having any errors, but you may have trouble transpiling modern JavaScript to down to some older JavaScript that other browsers can read. I'm using Chrome right now. So if you do have that problem, or to avoid that problem altogether, what you can do is you can use Babel to help you avoid that trouble. All right, so if you go to this URL here, it's github.com/babel/babel loader. Right? It'll give you what you need to install Babel with Webpack. So we'll go ahead and do that now. And remember, these are dev dependencies. Okay, and this will also help us later when we want to transpile JSX down to just simple JavaScript. And we're going to have to do that when we create our React app. All right, so if we want to use Babel, we're going to need a configuration file for that. So in your root, go ahead and create a file called .babelrc. It's probably easier to understand it if I say it that way. All right, and it will use presets. And the preset that we have right now is this one here, Babel/preset env. All right, so we'll use that. Okay, and we have to set up our Webpack configuration file to use it. All right, so to use it, you can see here it tells you to create this object called module and add some rules to it. So let's do that. Don't forget to add your comma at the bottom. All right, let's change the rules a little bit. Okay, we're going to use just JavaScript for now. We don't need that S there. All right, so this little regular expression makes sure that we select out those files. We're going to exclude the node modules, and it says here Bower components. We don't have to worry about that right now. Okay, and rather than have it set up this way, all right, since we're using that .babelrc folder, let's do this. And that should be okay. Why are we getting that? Okay, good. And if you're wondering why I'm shortening it that way, you can see here that this gentleman who runs some great tutorials, or he writes a lot on React and GraphQL. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but if you check it out up here, the URL up here, you can find him pretty easily. Oh, here's his name right here. So I'm just going to say it's Wiruk. I don't really know his name, but I'll just call him Robin. Anyway, he's got some great tutorials, some great blog posts on how to get up and running with React projects, and also GraphQL React projects using Apollo Server. Anyway, you can see that here in his Webpack configuration file, this is what he uses. He doesn't use what they were using here at the Babel loader homepage or the documentation. That's a little bit smoother. All right, and also below this, we're going to need to resolve these extensions. That just means all files, and then here we'll in particular resolve the JavaScript files. All right, so at least now we've got Babel in our project, and it's going to make sure that all of the code that needs to be transpiled down to the more simple JavaScript will be. All right, and if we run our app now, everything is running as it should. And always check your console just to make sure you're not getting any errors, right? We're still getting those messages that we included earlier in our code. And remember, before when we got the messages, we were getting them down here in our server console, but now we're actually getting them in the browser. That's because we're sending everything from our JavaScript files in our source folder to the dist folder, which is going to display everything in the browser. All right, so that's nice. And it also says here, live reloading enabled. It used to be before that you had to install that manually with Webpack, but now I think it's all included. Okay, so now let's move on to React. Okay, so this is not a big step. Just have to change a few things around. All right, so go into your, where is it now? Go into your home.js folder. Get rid of all of this. All right, and actually before we do anything, let's not be foolish here and actually install the most important dependencies of this project, which are React and React DOM. Okay, and here in our home.js file, we'll import React so we can use it. And let's just call this home. Alright, so now since we're making the transition to a real React project, we can change our message. Alright, we'll use export default. We're not going to use named exports here. Home. Alright, now we need to make sure that that's in our index.html file. Not HTML file, index.js file. So in this file, what we're going to do is import React from React. But we're also going to import React DOM from React DOM. All right, let's bring in the home page component. We'll just call it home again. And then you probably have seen this before. We use React DOM render. All right, and then we can just use home here. Remember, we use root. Let's go ahead and get rid of this index.html file in our source folder here, right? Not so we don't confuse ourselves. Okay, and go back up to your index.html file here, right? And add a div with the ID of root. All right, and you probably have seen this before if you've built React apps with Create React App. But this brings us to another point. We added the index.html file manually, but we can use a plugin with Webpack to actually generate this file for us from a template. So if you would, go ahead into your root, excuse me, your project root, and create a folder called public. And in that folder, create a file called template.html. All right, and then what we'll do is we'll take our index.html code here and we'll put it in template.html. And one more thing, eliminate this script tag. All right, and do that because what the plugin that we're going to use will do for us is it's going to actually add that script tag for us. All All right, so that looks good. Close that out. And now do something that might seem a little scary. Go ahead and delete the whole dist folder. All right. Because as I said, the plugin that we're going to use is actually going to, well, first of all, Webpack, when we run the build, is going to create the dist folder, and it's going to bundle our JavaScript from our source folder together into a file called bundle.js. And also with the plugin that we're going to use, it's going to add an index.html file for us based off this template that we just created. So take a look at this page. All right, you can see that, actually, I'll go back. You can just go to Webpack dev server, sorry, HTML Webpack plugin in Google, and go to the official webpack.js.org page, and it tells you how to install it here. Right, you install it as a dev dependency. So go ahead and do that now. All right, and then how to set it up in your Webpack configuration file. That's shown to you at the plugin documentation page. That's where we started off at. All right, and you can see down here they show you how to add the plugin to your Webpack configuration file. First, what we'll need to do now is we'll need to make sure that we bring it into our Webpack configuration file this way. All right, so just make sure you do that. And then underneath our output, we'll add the plugins. Actually, let's just copy everything that they have here. It's always safer to do that. Don't forget to add your trailing comma here so that you don't get any errors. All right, now, so if we run things as they are, this, like I said, Webpack will bundle your JavaScript files here together, in your source folder together, create the bundle.js file, but it'll also create that dist folder to put it in for you, and then it will also add an index.html file. So, all right, good. So what we'll do now is we'll run npm run build. Oh, we got an error. What happened here? Okay. So the first thing that, well, actually, you probably can see from the error code here that we're going to need something to help us parse the JSX code that we have, right? We don't have the appropriate loader, right? And what we'll need to do is we actually have the appropriate loader, but we're going to need something to help us along. And that will be a package. Actually, we'll just install it ourselves here. And this will be at babel /preset React. All right, because now our code is React code. All right, good. And let's run that. Or let's install that. Good. All right, check your package JSON, make sure it's there. You've got it. So all we need to do now to use this is go into our .babelrc file and add that as a preset. Okay, and then go into your Webpack configuration file And now we need to make sure that it's looking also for JSX files. So add that to your test when you use your Babel loader. And also we want it to resolve the .jsx extension, file extension. Okay, now let's see what happens. Okay, so now it's added back that dist folder. All right, we've got our bundle.js file back, and we've got an index.html file in there. Now, because we told it to use the bundle.js in our configuration file, this is correct. But you can see that this is not what we had before. In our index.html file from our template, we gave the title of our application. Well, actually, we don't even need this, do we? Should be a React app now. But you can see that none of this, there wasn't a heading tag, there wasn't a div with an ID of root. None of that was included in the index.html file that was added to your dist folder. And to make sure that we get that file built off of our template, we need to set up our HTML Webpack plugin a little bit more thoroughly. All right, so first what we need to do is tell it what template to use. Sorry about that. All right, and the template's going to be the public, in the public folder, and it's the template.html file. And the file name that we want it to give to that newly created file, for example, if I wanted to call it new HTML file.html, I could do that. Right, so I could go to my dist folder here, I can delete it again, and I can run the build script again. Now when I check out the newly created dist folder, I see that I've got this HTML file called new HTML file. And it actually has code based off of the template. So that's good. But of course I wouldn't want to call it new HTML file, so I can go back here and just give it the default name of index.html. Alright, and we don't need to keep deleting the dist folder, we can just do npm run build and it'll rebuild it. Alright, so you can see. The only problem is we need to delete this HTML file there. Good. Alright. So if we run our dev server, will we actually see this message here, right, that we've included in our JSX file, our React file here, right? And if we see that, then we know that we've gotten through everything we needed to get through today, which is to set up a basic React project. All right, so let's run our dev server. I think I said start, not dev. All right, there it is. All right, so this comes from our index.html file, and this comes from our React file, our home.js file. Right, and of course, usually we don't include anything other than just the div with the root ID when we create a React app project, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. All right, and if we stop our dev server, we delete the dist folder, just because we're going to have to delete that newly added index.html file anyway. We run the build script again. Right, good, and so we got our new index.html. That was very foolish of me, and you probably spotted that before I just realized now my foolish mistake. I need to take it out of my template, otherwise it's just going to keep adding it back in. All right, so one more time, npm run build. Okay, and there we go. And that's what we wanted. All right, so let's run our dev server one more time. Okay, good. So we have a simple React app project up and running using Webpack, right? We haven't had to use create React app to bootstrap our project. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. I would not criticize anyone for doing that. In fact, I do that most of the time myself. I like to create projects in Gatsby, actually. But to not be able to set up your own React project from scratch using a Webpack, or using Webpack and setting up your own custom Webpack configuration file or set of files, puts you at a disadvantage, right? It leaves you kind of in the dark about what's going on with your project. And going forward, when you build more complicated projects that need specific functionality, you may have to use a Webpack configuration file that has something beyond what, say, create React app, their Webpack configuration file gives you. But for now, I hope that you are comfortable with how to go from a very simple JavaScript application started with Node to an actual React app. And in the next video, we'll look at the other loaders that we're going to need so that we can actually use files and CSS in our project. But for now, that's it. So thank you as always for checking me out, and I will see you soon. Cheers.